Negative here. I'm back with an interesting analysis of two recent crossovers I read with the Planet of the Apes. Basically, the Planet of the Apes comics have been going from Boom for a couple of years, and now they're with Marvel. But they were 20th Century Fox properties, but they were published by Boom for a long time. And during that time, Boom published two interesting crossovers, which were studying contrast. One is Tarzan on the Planet of the Apes, which is Dark Horse had the right, might still have, no, Tarzan on the Planet of the Apes, which came out in, let's see, 2016, written by Tim Seeley, local man, and David F. Walker, who had been writing a Boom, both timelines, Boom, Planet of the Apes comics for a while, and this is the 1968 original timeline. David Walker recently published a really good Reeves universe timeline, Planet of the Apes comics with Marvel, which you should check out, called The Fall of Man. And then the second one, Kong on the Planet of the Apes. Now this is not King Kong exactly. This is Kong, as in the character from the novel Kong of Skull Island, created and co-written by illustrator Joe DeVito, which is a good novel. But it's also kind of this thing where, like, Joe DeVito and his writers have been kind of coasting off this novel and like using it. In fact, that Skull Island Rise of Kong game, that's not based on like King Kong the movie character. That's based on the novel, and I bet they regret doing that project now. Anyway, so Kong and the Planet of the Apes was published around 2018. At that time, Boom had the rights to defeat Kong of Skull Island, and they published a pretty entertaining 12 issue series featuring Kong, drawn by Carlos Magno, who also draws Kong Planet of Apes, and written by a guy who's kind of disappeared recently, James Asmus. So, but I recently read these it was interesting studying contrasts, and I just feel like talking about them. I'm going to get by the one I didn't like first. It's Tarzan on the Planet of the Apes. So basically, the premise is: what if during the time travel that kicks off Escape of the Planet of the Apes, what if instead of going back to the 1960s or 70s, Cornelius, Zira, and Milo overshot their goal and wound up in the early 1900s, and wound up in where Tarzan was, and basically raised him as their own, along with starting their own family. And it's a pretty neat premise, but then it starts kind of spinning after the first issue or so. It kind of starts spinning out of control, because I don't know how to put this. Basically, Caesar becomes a teenager. If Caesar and Tarzan become friends, like Cornelius and Zira give birth to Caesar, and they become friends. And basically, the time travel that kicked off the events of the story, it's weird, because like they wind up with Kamala and all the others, and Korchak basically sort of ruling that ape world, but not. And like basically the time travel we discover is making things worse. And I don't know how to put it. Like it's really, you got to read it, Like basically it turns out that, how do I put it this way? Tarzan and Caesar are the nominal protagonists, but there's a twist, and they're really not. They're not really driving the action, and the villains aren't. And something occurs. It's a pretty ingenious twist, but it kind of shifts it so it's barely a Tarzan. Tarzan feels more like a guest. I mean, they use a lot of Tarzan mythos, but it doesn't feel like a real meeting of the mythos. It feels like a Tarzan story guest starring a, a Planet of the Apes story guest starring Tarzan, because Tarzan's not the nominal protagonist, and neither is Caesar. There's another character. It's a pretty ingenious twist, but it never rises above the plot to the idea of plot machinations. It's all about it. It turns out to be it's about a guy trying to rewrite the timeline and failing constantly. And he should have been the point of view character because of what happens. But he's not the point of view character. That's because if I told you who is what he is and what he's doing, I would kind of ruin the twist. And in the end, it kind of wanders off and ends. It's weird because it almost becomes it's a act quite accidentally posits Tarzan as a white savior. Pretty much accidentally. And it also kind of ends in a quote. It's interesting. Like, it feels like it's a setup for something else, but there's never been a sequel, and I don't think a sequel was planned. I gotta admit, it's actually sort of, there's some interesting work by Fernando Dagino, artwork. All the colors I think are a little too muted, and I think it kind of swallows the line work. I'm not really sure. It's not bad per se, but sometimes it makes the facial expressions look all messed up. So I can't really recommend this series. But on the other hand, it's something interesting. There's a really interesting idea. It's just not executed in the way I found satisfactory. Which brings us to something I did like, Kong on the Planet of the Apes. Now this is interesting. It's kind of like what I spoke about. I'm not to go into too much detail. This also can fit perfectly between Planet of the Apes and the events of Escape from the Planet of the Apes. I'm not going to say how because that's another spoiler. I mean, it wasn't really necessary, but this is not James Asmussen, right? This is a guy named Ryan Ferrier. He worked on Dave for IDW, and Carlos Magno has done Planet of the Apes comics, Kong Skull Island, Cyborg. Like, he's been around forever. He has this weird sinewy artwork that I find really fascinating. Although I'm not perfect, but man, he can do some widescreen splash page action like nobody's business when he's got the right material. And he did good on the Kong of Skull Island series, which he drew entirely, and he drew all 12 issues in a row. So basically, what happens: a dead Kong washes up on the beach after the events of Planet of the Apes. Cornelius, Kira, Ursus, and Dr. Zaius all go on an expedition to find what the hell this is. And they happen upon Skull Island. And what follows is kind of an interesting morality play, as like basically Cornelius and Zira, want to explore Skull Island and Kong and these humans that can talk, which they didn't see that coming. There's more humans who can talk, just like Taylor. And then, but like Zaius, who's trying to keep, his world from spinning out of control, and Ursus, they see opportunity with the Kong. And it's actually a kind of a really bleak, depressing story, but a good one, where like, as well-intentioned as Zaius is, his lust for, like, it's clouding his judgment, and Ursus is such a jerk. I mean, and Cornelius and Zira try their best, but they just wind up making things worse. So they take Kong back to the ape world, and it does not go because they want to use Kong as a way to enforce the law, like, was Kong as a weapon. And there's kind of the tragedy of the woman who, the one human they take back with her, to pacify him. The poor woman tries to help, is imprisoned, and tries to help Kong, and it doesn't work out. It's kind of like it's about a story about how the road to hell is paved with good intentions, or at least intentions that are trying to. Again, Zaius and Ursus are trying to fix things. Cornelius and Zira are trying to improve things, and they're playing with power they don't understand, or rather, they do understand it, but their folly is they think they're the ones who can control it, and with Kong they can't. So it builds to a really tragic climax, and it fits in. There's also a scene where like it's a bit of fan service, but it also fits in like why did like it also provides a good motivation for Zaius and Cornelia to do what they do at the opening of Planet Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And that's kind of all I have to say about both books. They were interesting studying contrasts. I definitely recommend if you can find it because I believe since Boom has neither the rights to Joe DeVito's Kong or Planet of the Apes, this is probably way out of print at this point. Tarzan and Planet of the Apes I can't really recommend, although there's some good ideas here. It honestly feels like the first chapter of something. But both series I think do a good job playing with their respective mythology, but mostly with the mythologies of Planet of the Apes. So I mean, like I would definitely recommend Kong on Planet of the Apes. It's a good read. Anyway, well, hit the bell, like, and subscribe, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.